Hey guys, Jared here, and I wanted to make a quick intro for this episode. It's a little bit different. I didn't have time to do full recording, so instead I took a large number of pictures and I'm going to provide a narration for it. This particular project is another one for my truck project. The original interior door panels or the door cards were getting worn out. I wanted something to look a little nicer, it's a little bit easier to clean. My door panels for the 94 had carpet on them, and that's just really tricky to clean, and it was getting worn out. So I wanted to upgrade to the 1995 to really, I think, 2011 door panels, which instead use a vinyl padding in place of the carpet. So went to the junkyard and I picked them up, and this is the video on how I solved the various engineering challenges to get those on the door. The door cards themselves fit fine, but the engineering challenge is that I have power windows and power locks, and there were some incompatibilities that had to be worked around. So without further ado, let's get started.
We'll start this out by looking at the finished product first. So as you can see, as I mentioned in the intro, instead of carpeting down at the bottom where your feet would hit, or up at the top right around the door lock, that is a vinyl. Makes it much easier to clean, and since I live in a very sandy environment, instead of having to do a lot of scrubbing and vacuuming to try to get sand out, I can just blow it off. Now, from here on out, we'll actually start looking at the various bits and bobbles that we need to see in order to make all this work. This is a closer in shot of the end result. You'll notice it looks a bit odd, and those of you who own a 95 and up Ranger will notice that those buttons are not right. What I wound up having to do is utilize a mismatch of the original 1994 buttons with the bezels from I think this was a 2001 Ford Ranger that I pulled these from in order to make it all work. And in order to get it all to join together, I did have to install these bezels upside down. We'll get more into that on a later slide. First thing we need to do is take off the interior door panel. On a 1994, there is a single screw that goes up near the side view mirror on the inside. There is a single screw that goes in the driver's handhold at the bottom, and there is a single screw in the bottom left corner of the door. Get all three of those screws out and then gently lift up and out to disengage the clips that you see on the door panel there, and also you can see where those clips go in the door frame itself. You're going to need to be kind of gentle when you pull it out, because at that point in time all of the switches are still going to be plugged in. But we're going to take care of this stuff on the door, and then we will move to actually separating the stuff on the door panel. You'll see here, this is the bracket that mounts to the actual door frame for the screw that goes down in the bottom of the driver's door handle or handhold on the 94 style door panel. So these two screws need to come out and this bracket needs to come out. Go ahead and grab a Phillips and remove them. This is what it's going to look like once the bracket's removed. You can remove these little clips, or you can choose not to. The screws that come out are sheet metal screws, so they are self-tapping, and so you don't really need these clips. Do hold on to those screws though, you are going to need them later. Now to start on taking apart the rest of the door panel. So if you look carefully on the perimeter of the black plastic here, you'll see a series of clips that basically snap into the rest of the door panel. So in order to get better access to all the various switches, you're going to need to pop these clips loose from the inside. Depending on the state of the plastic and your clips, you may just be able to pull and pop them out that way. I had to depress the tabs on the inside with a screwdriver to help push them out so I could get this black trim piece free from the rest of the door panel. Notice that the existing switches on the 94, at least this is a driver's door, have a pair of screws that are holding it in. Now that we've got the door panel broken down, we need to talk about the differences in the 94 era switches and the 95 and above switches for the doors. This is a window switch for 95 and above, and it's composed of two pieces. There is the switch and the connector mount, which you'll see in a later picture, and then there is the bezel that goes around the switch. That's the part that is labeled window. So we're going to need to separate these, and we're going to need to do a little bit of carving a little bit later. This is a better picture of the bezel I just referenced a moment ago. That's what it looks like without the switch installed. The way you separate it is if you look on the side of the switch, there are 4 tabs, 2 on each side, that hold the bezel onto the rest of the switch assembly. Carefully, or in my case not so carefully, take a screwdriver, pop those tabs free, and the bezel will separate from the rest of the switch assembly. Let's take a look at the 94 era switches. You'll see that they have a different pattern and an overall different shape. The connector mounts are different. You'll see that big hole right there. That is for guide pins, alignment pins, so that these could easily be slapped in at the factory and then closed up. Another thing to notice, even though it's a little hard to see, are the 6 wires that come out of the connector base on the switch. They are much thicker and larger than the wires that come out of the connector base on the 95 and above switches, and we'll get into an explanation on that a few pictures down. Another thing to notice is that the connector base, where the wires come into, and the switch are one unit. You cannot separate them. On the 95s and above, they are 2 discrete pieces that can be unscrewed from each other. The exception to what I just said is for the driver's window controls. The driver's window controls is still wired the same way as the 94. The wires are the same size, and they do positionally line up with each other. The colors are a little different. But I was able to get those soldered in and was able to use the 95 and above door switch, driver's window switch, to make sure that that lined up and looked good. I was not able to do this though with the individual switches, and we're going to get more into that as we look at more pictures. I bring this picture back up to focus in on the power mirror adjuster control. It is the connector on the top there, so you have the large connector with the 2 rusted screws, and you have the other connector with the large retaining clip. That is the power mirror adjuster switch, and though the connectors do look identical, they are different. You can't really see in this shot, but there is a difference in the wiring that goes into the back of the connector from the 94 and below to the 95 and above. You can work around this though. Ultimately, what I figured out is that you can pop out the 95 and above power mirror adjuster switch and then pop in the 94 and below switch, and they have the same dimensions and will fit inside the black plastic trim for the 95 and above. And once you do that, you can utilize the original connector on the 94 harness and everything works fine. This was another shot of the power mirror adjuster connector just to show that it is functionally on the front. It's an identical style of connector to the one that was used in the 95 and above. The difference is what is on the back. Again, it is a bit difficult to see, but if you look closely at the wires going into the back of that connector, that's the one for the 94 harness, you'll see there's a double yellow kind of in the back corner that is not present on the 95 and above. And when I did my test, that does make a difference, and the power mirror does not work if you try to use the 95 with the wires that come out of the 95. It just won't work. Or 95 and above, excuse me. This is a side shot of one of the bezels from the 95 and above switch. there is the long plastic post there that we're going to use actually as a way to attach the 94 harness switch to the bezel from the 95 and above by taking some of those self-tappers that we pulled earlier off the door, and we'll use that to connect the two together. But in order to make all that work, that's the reason why we have to turn the bezel 180 degrees to line up with the screw connector on the 94 harness side. And here is a picture of that in action. I've taken a screw and I've ran it into that plastic to hold the two pieces together. The bottom there is the original 94 harness. The top is the bezel snapped into position into the 95 and above door trim. And I use the screw to adjust how high the entire switch assembly is in that bezel, because if it's too high, then the plastic begins to interfere with the button and it doesn't travel smoothly. So you're going to have to do your fine tuning by adjusting how tight that screw is. In order to make sure that screw will fit, you'll have to take I think it was a 13th, 16th drill bit that I used to kind of widen out the hole in the center of that post. Made sure it went all the way through so that I could run the screw all the way in. Another issue you're going to run into when you try to install the 94 connector assembly into a 95 and above bezel is that the bezel is keyed, and when you try to rotate it 180 degrees to accommodate that screw line up so you can actually join the two together, it doesn't want to go because that long post starts catching on the bottom corner of the cutout in the trim. So what you're going to need to do is take a drill bit and then carve that down, or a sharp knife or the tool of your choice, and grind that down a bit so that you can make it all fit. As you can see, I've taken that bottom right corner and I've worn it down a bit. In my case, I use a drill bit because I didn't have any kind of a rotary tool, which I now do. You should go get one if you don't have one. It's great for little jobs like this. And once you've done this, you can go ahead and you can snap the bezel in from the top. It may still try to fight you a bit if you put it in one by one, so you kind of have to push the locking tabs in at the same time, top and bottom, as you push it in to make sure that it will snap in evenly. So here's the finished result. This is the passenger door. I've got everything reassembled just to kind of show what it's going to look like. So you see that the 94 buttons are kind of recessed. The only way that you're going to be able to push them higher is that you're going to have to do more carving. And at the time, I didn't have the right tools and I was running out of daylight, so I decided to be happy with this result. If you want those buttons to come up higher and to look better, then, as I said, you're going to have to disassemble this again, and you're going to have to take a rotary tool or a sharp blade or a file, and you're going to have to start filing down on the 94 connector assembly itself. You're going to have to do some filing on the ridge that goes around the oval on the bezel to try to make the clearance so that you can raise the button up and it look a bit better that way. I didn't feel like doing all the shaving and carving, so I left that as is. It works great. The travel was fine. I can get some canned air in there to spray things out if I need to, so I'm pretty content with how it turned out. This is a finished shot of the driver's door. Driver's door is a bit more worn, so the stamped lettering is more faded. But in this case, as I mentioned earlier, the 95 and up switch assembly for the driver's windows works perfectly. So you can just swap it right over and solder it in, and the bezel, it fits. So you get a much cleaner look than what I've had to do with the individual switches. As you can see, the door lock switch had to do the custom modification that I was referring to in order to make that work. When you start to put the 95 and up door panel back on, it is screwed in a couple of different places. You still have the screw on the lower the lower left corner on the outside, just like you do on the 94 panel, and the holes do line up, so you can reuse the same screw there. However, there is a screw that is located under the black trim panel that all the switches are mounted into. You'll need to run that in. It's a sheet metal screw, a self-tapper. So my suggestion to you is to take one of the self-tappers that we got from pulling the bracket out and use it again here. Take a drill, just knock it in, and that'll secure this part of the door. Here is the screw in the lower corner I mentioned. Again, the holes will line up as long as you've got the door fully seated and in position. So you can take the same screw, it's a Phillips, and send it right in. Okay, 2 more screws that need to be talked about. Can't see them in this picture. This is the only one I have, unfortunately. But behind the driver's handrail, there are 2 screws in the black plastic trim that, again, they go directly into the sheet metal of the door. So you can take any self-tappers you got lying around, or take some that you still have from this whole conversion process. And I found that the screw holes in the black trim are at an angle, so one of the screws is going to bite into the sheet metal pretty well, and you won't have any issues. The other one does go at an angle, and there is a hole, I believe, in the sheet metal right about where that screw is, so it doesn't really want to bite very well. But I found that the door is not budging with just one screw in it, so if you want to do just one screw, I think that works.
Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed that picture video. Hope it was useful. If you enjoyed it and you'd like to see more, please make sure that you click like and subscribe. That helps get me the funds necessary to maintain this channel and make new content. And hopefully I'll see you guys soon.